One is a true story from your life that sounds made up. Story 1. I have an unusual story. Many years ago, when I was in high school, I had a school project to interview a professional scientist. Luckily, my dad worked at our local university and knew a scientist in a research lab. So I went to interview him. The lab was difficult to locate. It was in the basement of a building, tucked away behind the maintenance area, quite dark, a bit unsettling and out of the way. Eventually, I found it. The scientist, an older gentleman, this was in the early 1980s, was very happy to talk. In fact, he seemed quite isolated. After we went through all my interview questions, he started sharing more about his life, and the conversation gradually shifted to his experiences as a young sailor on a naval vessel in the North Atlantic during World War II. What I didn't realize was that he was about to share some deeply personal and difficult memories that had stayed with him since that time. As he spoke, he became more emotional, talking about the pressure he was under, the constant storms, the ever-present danger, the lonely hours spent watching over the sea. Finally, he reached the most intense part of his story. According to him, during one of those long night watches, he had an unexpected encounter with a fellow crew member who had some personal issues to discuss. They ended up in an argument that became physical. The other person was injured during the altercation. The narrator, concerned about the consequences, made a difficult decision in the challenging circumstances. It was night in the North Atlantic in winter with rough seas, and no one else witnessed what happened. The other sailor was officially listed as missing, presumed lost at sea. But of course, there was a different reality to the situation. I didn't know how to respond to that. I quickly thanked him for his time and left. Story 2. Here's the story of how I met my second and final wife. It was sometime in the late 1990s, and I was single again. I was a big fan of Mountain Dew, and Pepsi had launched their Pepsi Stuff promotion. One of the prizes I really wanted was a leather jacket. I never owned one before, so I decided to try for it. To enter, you had to register for a free Yahoo account and input codes from bottle caps and packaging. So I signed up for Yahoo. While I was there, I figured I'd explore what else Yahoo had to offer. I discovered Yahoo Personals, a platform where people could create profiles, including basic dating advertisements. You didn't need a paid account to browse, only to respond, so I took a look at some of the profiles. I thought most of them were a bit generic, and that I could write a more engaging one. They offered a 30-day free trial, so I signed up for Yahoo Personals and posted my own ad. I received exactly one reply. Perhaps my personal ad writing skills weren't as strong as I thought. She had also signed up for the 30-day trial just to respond to my profile. We chatted online through Yahoo for a while, discovered she lived about 45 minutes away, and we played some online games together. We talked on the phone, and eventually we met, fell in love, and got married. It really does sound like something out of a movie. She even ended up breaking up with her then boyfriend when she started talking to me. And yes, I did win the leather jacket. I still have it. Story 3. When I was younger, my stepfather took me into a wooded area with tools and bags in the vehicle. He told me that if I chose to live with my father, he would harm me, and that my biological mother had agreed. He gave me 2 weeks to reconsider. My father, likely on the advice of his legal counsel, only asked me to inform one of my teachers to contact him if I didn't attend school one day and explain why. So I did, and my teacher, as a mandated reporter, initiated a Child Protective Services investigation. The unsettling part is that my stepfather took me to a fast food restaurant afterward and then to school. I recounted all of this to Child Protective Services. Apparently, my stepfather denied my account. However, the legal team was able to obtain video evidence from the fast food restaurant, which was used to question the credibility of his denial. My father was granted custody, and for 6 months, I struggled with sleep, constantly worried about my safety. Story 4. I had a stroke of good fortune during a job interview. I arrived 15 minutes early and was asked to wait in the hiring manager's office. On his desk, there were several brochures, and to pass the time, I decided to read one. The hiring manager was a bit delayed, so I had about half an hour before the interview began. When he finally arrived, he asked me what I understood about the company's work, and I essentially summarized the information from the brochure. He responded that it was a very good answer. I received a job offer the following day. 6 months into the role, I was performing well, and he happened to notice the brochure. During my one-year review, he inquired if I had read it, and I laughed and admitted that I had. He then gave me a positive review and a raise. Story 5. During my year living in the Congo, some friends and I decided to take a trip to the coast, hitchhiking there and back to Kinshasa. On our return journey, we managed to get a ride with a UN vehicle. You know the type, those open-sided jeeps with no roof. We were traveling at around 30 miles per hour on a dirt and gravel road that was carved into the side of a fairly steep hill. In the distance, down in the valley, we spotted a herd of wild buffalo, and the bulls started pawing the ground, from a distance of maybe 200 yards or more. Sure enough, he charged, heading straight up the hill. We pointed and laughed, thinking there was no way he could reach us. But amazingly, he got closer and closer, and then bam! He had calculated the angle perfectly. He hit us in the rear panel, spinning us around several times, and we ended up sliding sideways into the hillside, facing the wrong direction. Thankfully, we didn't roll over because of the slope. Nobody was hurt. As the dust settled, we all looked at each other in utter disbelief. The bull, now more than 50 yards away from us, simply shook his head. It must have hurt him too, as he hit the rear driver's side wheel squarely. Then he trotted back down the hill to rejoin the herd. The driver got out a crowbar and bent the wheel well back into shape as it was jammed against the tire. We continued on our journey. Story 6. When I was a kid, around 8 or 9, I absolutely loved climbing this really tall pine tree on the mountainside near our house. I'd go up it almost every day because the view from the top was just amazing. One afternoon, I was climbing up to watch the sunset. I was maybe halfway up when I heard a noise nearby. I looked over and saw a mountain lion just relaxing on a branch right across from me, staring right at me. My heart must have skipped a beat. I just slowly and carefully climbed back down and had a very uneasy walk back home. Story 7. As a medical student in the preclinical years, I participated in anatomy lab, where we had the opportunity to dissect cadavers. One of the cadavers in our lab had passed away due to complications from kidney failure, as indicated on the identification tag. During the dissection of the leg and buttock muscles, the anatomy team discovered a bullet lodged in the gluteus medius. It was completely unrelated to the cause of death. I find it amusing to picture the individual who donated their body, perhaps signing the paperwork with a thought about the future medical students encountering this unexpected detail during their dissection. Story 8. In my line of work, there's a constant emphasis on networking and generating revenue. Just before I took a vacation, I received an email from a small company I didn't know, requesting a Zoom meeting within the next few days. I decided to set some boundaries for once and inform them that I would be unavailable for several weeks. I then went on holiday to a location about 500 miles away and spent my time sightseeing. A few days into my trip, I found myself at a bus stop in a quiet rural area, waiting for the bus back to my hotel. The bus only came once an hour, and I had some time to spare, but I was enjoying being disconnected from work, so I didn't mind the wait. I glanced behind me and noticed a building, which turned out to be the exact company that had reached out to me. So after telling them I wouldn't be available for an online meeting, I ended up completely by chance standing right outside their office, 500 miles from home, on the same day they had wanted to connect, with some time to spare. Story 9. This happened a couple of years ago. I, 57M, was about to leave the house when my wife, 55, called out, "Stop that person in front." I asked, "Why?" She replied, "They just relieved themselves in our yard." I went outside, and the person was starting to walk away. I called out, "Excuse me." They turned around, and everything about them suggested a certain lifestyle. I asked, "Did you just use my yard?" They chuckled and said, "No, just as my wife came out." She said firmly, "Yes, you did it. I saw you." The person just kept walking. So I followed them, and suddenly I was quite assertive. "Hey, and where do you think you're going?" I live in a generally peaceful neighborhood, and our neighbors were starting to peek out, clearly taken aback by the volume of my voice. I have no idea where that energy came from, but I kept walking after them, surprisingly recording them on my phone. As they reached the corner, a car honked, and it was a friend. The person turned back, gave me a look, and headed towards the car. "You think you can just leave?" I kept following and filming, right up to the car. Their friend saw me and rolled down the window. He gave me a direct look and asked, "Is there an issue?" I shouted at the top of my lungs, "That individual just used my yard." That got audible reactions from the neighbors nearby. It probably wasn't my most rational moment, but I was in the moment. I'm not sure what I expected the person to do, but they turned to the person and said, "What the heck? You're out of line." Then, "And you're going to clean it up too." Then to me, "Come on, let's make them take care of it." It turned out the driver, let's call him Paco, did yard work in the neighborhood, and the person had been working for him. So we went back to my house in Paco, and I told the person, "Go on, clean it up." The person asked if we had a shovel. Paco and I started teasing them even more for asking. Every move and word from them was met with a look or a comment from us. While this was happening, Paco looked at our lawn and said, "Wow, who usually takes care of your yard?" Our regular person had stopped coming the week before. My wife suggested, "You if you'd like," and I agreed. So while the person was dealing with the situation in our yard, Paco checked out the property and gave a price that was quite reasonable. I offered him the job at a slightly higher rate, and he accepted. Now, Paco handles our lawn care. He's grateful for the extra work and is always willing to help out. We look out for each other. Paco's a good person. The other person still works for him, and at least when they're around, Paco keeps a close eye on them. Story 10. I left high school at 15 with no clear direction, drifting through various customer service roles with little hope for the future. Then, I met a colleague who was passionate about writing. We became friends, and she told me I seemed intelligent and asked if I would help her learn how to become an author. In return, she offered to make me her manager and share the book's earnings with me. I found office work to be draining and detrimental to my well-being, and there were times when I struggled with my mental health. However, the one thing that kept me going was supporting my friend in pursuing her dream. Fast forward a decade, and we're the closest of friends. I played a part in helping her become a successful author, and her books have sold millions of copies. We live close to each other now, both happily married, and my work involves assisting her with her writing, which takes up less than 10 hours a week. It feels like I've won the lottery, honestly. Story 11. Years ago, when I lived in Florida, I was outside my workplace with my boss one day. It started to rain, and it was quite peculiar. The rain seemed to be falling directly on me and only me. I could actually step in and out of the rain, much like a scene from a movie. My boss, who was standing right there with me, found the whole thing so amusing that she couldn't help but laugh. Story 12. My sister has had a habit of causing significant distress by falsely claiming her own death on 2 separate occasions. The first time was back in 1998. She was only gone for 3 days before contacting my parents to reveal it was a prank. This caused a great deal of upheaval for our family. I was in my 3rd month of pregnancy at the time. One evening, while I was at work, my husband received a phone call at home. The caller identified themselves as a law enforcement officer from Colorado, informing him that my sister had been killed in a car accident. My husband came to my workplace to tell me the news. I was deeply shocked and distraught. Over the next 3 days, my former brother-in-law and I spent countless hours trying to find out details about the accident and where my sister was so we could make arrangements. My mother and I both took 3 days off work, and my father was understandably very upset. My former brother-in-law and I ran up substantial long-distance phone bills trying to gather information. Despite our efforts, we couldn't find any official confirmation. After 3 days, around 3 o'clock in the morning, my parents received a call from my sister. She was laughing and asked how they enjoyed her joke. The second instance occurred earlier this year. My cousin's wife was aware that my sister had been spreading the false news of her death. About a month later, my cousin's wife informed my aunt that my sister was, in fact, still alive. I wasn't directly involved this time, so I don't have the specifics of that situation. Story 13. I decided to go for a swim in the ocean one night, and unfortunately, I had my money and debit card in my pocket. When I came out of the water, I realized my pockets were empty. The next morning at sunrise, I went back with a snorkel to search. Luckily, I spotted my card. I recognized the shiny emblem on the back amidst the seagrass, and I'd even found a few of the bills that had been in my pocket. Losing everything would have left me in a difficult situation without any access to funds. Story 14. I'll try to keep this concise without missing anything important. Several years ago, I had a customer at my food service job who left a lasting impression. Let's call her Ruby for this story. She was memorable for 3 reasons. 1. She asked about my former manager, who had recently gone on maternity leave. 2. She had a very distinct personal style and gave a unique name for her order. And 3. She was visibly transgender and in the early stages of her transition. I'm not mentioning this out of any prejudice, but because it contributed to the overall impression she made. It's hard to forget a tall woman, maybe 6'2", with a deeper voice, wearing a dress so stunning I still remember it. Anyway, I passed on her well wishes to my manager, who was also a friend, and didn't think much more of it. Fast forward a couple of years, and my friend and I were working together again as supervisors at a different location. She was telling me about a friend who had been through a tough time. She'd gotten married, then come out as transgender, thankfully. Her wife was supportive, but her family was struggling with it. Then, within about a year of each other, both her father and brother had passed away unexpectedly. I was listening, feeling sympathetic, when suddenly it clicked. I'd met this woman. She came to my store once. Sure enough, it was Ruby. Eventually, she added me on Facebook, though we didn't chat much beyond commenting on mutual friends' posts, as our social circles had some overlap. I didn't think much more of it until a year later, when Ruby started posting photos from her sister's wedding, including some then and now pictures of her sister as a child. It hit me like a revelation. I knew that little girl. I remember her at that age. It was like finally stepping back from a completed puzzle and seeing the whole picture. That Saturday night, I was frantically texting my former manager friend to confirm some details about Ruby and her family. Turns out, over 15 years prior, Ruby and I had been good friends. In fact, pre-transition Ruby was the first person I ever dated at the age of 14. The transformation was so complete that she had stood right in front of me, and I hadn't recognized her. We had a falling out in high school and hadn't seen or spoken to each other since. I knew Ruby's recently married sister. I knew her late brother and father. Her mother's lasagna remains the best I've ever tasted. We used to spend hours playing video games together at her house. It took out a week, but I finally gathered the courage to reach out to her. Our party had been on bad terms, so I wasn't sure how she'd respond. But she remembered me and wanted to meet up. That was a few years ago. We're not close, but we still talk occasionally. She's doing well, and her family is healing. It still amazes me how small the world can be. Story 15. My mother had been estranged from her father for her entire life, but she kept a phone number that she believed was his. After years, she finally gathered the courage to call him. His daughter answered the phone and informed my mother that he had passed away approximately a week earlier. Story 16. A long time ago, right after high school, my father had a child with a woman. They separated and she was already in a relationship and planning to marry someone else when she found out she was pregnant. My dad wasn't in a position to be a parent at the time, so he relinquished his parental rights, and the woman's partner adopted the baby. Fast forward 18 years. My parents are divorced and remarried, and I have a stepbrother who happens to be best friends with my half-brother. There was concern that my stepbrother might interact with my sister and me, and since he looked remarkably like my father, they had to reveal the situation to everyone, including my half-brother, who was unaware that his father wasn't his biological father. It's not as dramatic as some of the other stories, but it was still quite a revelation for us. Another interesting coincidence, my mother and I share the same birthday. And, as it happens, my half-brothers are also twins with the same birthday. Story 17. One summer, at the family cabins, we used to ride our all-terrain vehicles. On a particular part of the trail, a raven would have a unique habit. It would swoop down, grasp onto the rear luggage rack, spread its wings, and enjoy the ride. The raven would dismount as soon as we reached the end of that section of the trail, and it would stay on as long as we didn't pay it any attention. Story 18. I was on a boat in Colombia, traveling from the beach in Cartagena towards Tierra Bamba. Suddenly, the engine cut out, and we started to drift. The situation became quite tense. While the swells weren't large enough to capsize us, without power, the boat was vulnerable to rolling sideways. We eventually drifted relatively close to the island, where there were very long piers. I saw an opportunity to potentially jump onto one, so I gathered a rope at the front of the boat. The person in charge of the engine tried to advise against it, but considering he hadn't prepared for the engine failing, I wasn't too concerned with his opinion. I timed the swell as best I could and jumped as powerfully as I could. At the time, I was young and in good physical shape. I just managed to land on the pier. I then secured the boat, and the other passengers were visibly relieved and very appreciative. They even applauded. I felt a surge of confidence and was in a good mood for the rest of the day. Story 19. When I was around 5 years old, my brother and the other children at daycare dug a hole in an old family cemetery, put me in it, and left me there. I managed to climb out and told my parents what happened. They ended up disciplining me for not telling the truth. My brother finally admitted what happened when he was in his 40s, and my mother's reaction was to laugh it off as just something kids do. This is just one of several instances where my brother's actions could have been considered very serious, yet he never faced any real consequences. Story 20. I once experienced persistent muscle twitching and sought the opinion of a neuroscientist to rule out any serious neurological issues. During the consultation, he provided some unconventional advice, suggesting I avoid vaccinations and gluten, disconnect my television at night, and expressed concerns about 5G technology and government control. He also shared a personal experience involving what he described as a secret military procedure in Virginia in 1972, claiming this gave him unique insights. He conveyed that I lacked the understanding to grasp the vast esoteric knowledge he possessed and mentioned the constant observation of humanity by highly intelligent extraterrestrial beings. I recorded our entire conversation discreetly using my phone in my pocket, as I felt the need to document what I was being told by this licensed medical professional to ensure I wasn't misinterpreting the situation. When I tried to focus on my specific concern, the muscle twitches, his response was a casual "okay, cool," but followed by his detailed explanation. Part of me still finds the idea of his unique perspective intriguing, but ultimately, his demeanor came across as quite eccentric.
That's a wrap for this video. Make sure to leave your relatable story down in the comments. I would love to make a video on them. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.